I have arrived, and today I'm going to be showcasing my top 10 albums of all time. Now, you've kind of noticed the setup's a bit different now. I'm actually in a new place. I got some stuff hung up. I'm still actually kind of in the process of moving, but I got all my records here now, and in the process of just getting everything. So, yeah, I'm going to showcase my top 10 favorite albums of all time. As of right now, my top 10, I will admit, it changes a lot. And I tried to whittle this down to just one album per artist. Because if I didn't do that, there'd be a lot more Prince, a lot more Elvis, and a lot more Buddy Holly on the list. And that kind of gives you, I guess, a little bit of a preview of what I'm going to show. So, without further ado, we'll start out with number 10. And this is Van Halen's self-titled debut. Such an incredible loss that we suffered in 2020 of Mr. Eddie Van Halen. And this is one of the few debut albums I just feel immediately blows any kind of standards out of the water. They just, very rarely do you have a debut album like this that just establishes who these guys are and what they're about to do. And that's kind of what Van Halen, the self-titled, is. I mean, you got great tracks all around. Of course, you got the well-known ones like Jamie's Crying and Eruption with You Really Got Me, Running with the Devil. But I think songs like I'm the One and Atomic Punk are really the highlights for me on this album, because it just shows you the technical skill of Eddie Van Halen, and just really the tightness of the band itself. And throughout the songs, you got great showmanship from David Lee Roth. So, yeah, this came out in 1978. This pressing is from 78, but it's not the first pressing. This is actually a club pressing, and the label it has, it's kind of like that very light tan with the Warner Brothers Records logo. I guess this kind of came out during a transitional period when because they used to have the label around this time. It used to be like the palm trees, but this was kind of when they were starting to transition away from that. So some copies, some first pressings have that, but yeah, this is the copy I got. It's also still in the shrink wrap. Yeah, amazing album all the way through. I first kind of fell in love with this album in high school, but over the years, I kind of started to appreciate it more and more. And then when Eddie Van Halen passed away, I picked up this record again, spun it, and yeah, it's just solid all the way through. Not a bad song on here. I even like Ice Cream Man and Little Dreamer, which I'd say are not the finest Van Halen hours, but honestly, they're great. They're great. So yeah, number 10 is Van Halen's debut from 1978. Now, this one I'm kind of cheating with. This is a compilation. This came out in 1972, and it's just a bunch of different bands. And it's the Nuggets compilation. Original artifacts from the first psychedelic era. This is actually a 2021 repressing. Original pressings of this go for like $100, which is worth it. But I just wanted to have this on vinyl, so I ended up just going for the newest issue. I've been listening to this album for at least a few years at this point. Look at the cover, too. Just really psychedelic stuff. And it was compiled by Lenny Kaye, who would later go on to play with the Patti Smith Group, if I'm not mistaken. But this has 27 songs, and it's from 27 different bands. Some of them were kind of well-known, but not really. I'd probably argue the most well-known band on here is probably like the Amboy Dukes, maybe the Seeds, or maybe the Electric Prunes. I don't know, but there's just a lot of great stuff on here. It was compiled by Lenny Kaye and Elektra Records, but this just has some nice, fuzzed-out stuff. Like, it opens up with I Had Too Much to Dream Last Night, which was by the Electric Prunes. Amazing, fuzzed out masterpiece of a song. And then you get to stuff like Dirty Water by the Standals, another great classic. Big Boston favorite, too, if you live in Boston. And then you get stuff like Nighttime. And then you get stuff like Lies by the Knickerbockers, which when I first heard this, I thought this was the Beatles. There's some other stuff. Public Execution by the group Mouse. Sounds like Bob Dylan. It's kind of another same thing with that. Don't Look Back by the Remains. Oh my gosh, talk about a killer garage rock song. Oh my gosh, amazing. And of course, You're Gonna Miss Me by the 13th Floor Elevators. You can't go wrong with that. What are some other ones? There's a lot of great ones. Psychotic Reaction by the Count 5. Tobacco Road by the Blues Magoos. Baby Please Don't Go by the Amboy Dukes, which features a pre-famed Ted Nugent. I do like the song, although I like Journey to the Center of the Mind just a little more. But I think this works for the compilation. Farmer John by the Premiers. I mean, just great all-around stuff. If you want to get an introduction into psychedelic music, or you're tired of stuff by the Beatles and Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd and all the kind of like premier psychedelic bands like Jimi Hendrix, you're tired of that, go to this. You will find some great music all around. But yeah, this is actually this might be the only various artist compilation I have in my collection right now. And it is the one to own, so pick yourself up a copy of this. They just reissued it. Get it for probably about $30. It's worth it. Alrighty. Next up is, speaking of the Beatles, Revolver. And the copy I have right here is actually a 2014 mono repressing, which now those mono albums are very sought after. I have a few of them. I really wish I would have picked up Sgt. Pepper when I did. But yeah. But we're talking about this album right here. This is, in my opinion, the Beatles' magnum opus. I mean, I love Sgt. Pepper. I love the White Album. I love all the Beatles albums, really. There isn't a bad Beatles album. But this, I personally think, was when just everything was just right. You get the opener Taxman. A very biting commentary on kind of the English tax system there, and honestly, it kind of fits over here. Eleanor Rigby, of course, is just a luscious, depressing song, and then I'm Only Sleeping, great one. It's got a great use of just the backwards guitar, a lot of great stuff. Of course, you got Yellow Submarine by Ringo. Here, There, and Everywhere is also, I'd say it's probably one of Paul's finest songwriting ventures. And then side 2, you get stuff like Gotta Get You Into My Life, which is another early favorite of mine. And then Tomorrow Never Knows, the closing track. That's a mind melter. Even to this day, it's great. Like, the Beatles were the first band I ever really got into, and I don't really listen to them a whole lot anymore. But whenever I revisit this, it's always a welcome revisiting. So yeah, Beatles Revolver. And now this is kind of a semi-quasi compilation of the King of Rock and Roll, although some people nowadays would like to debate that. And yeah, I could see some of the debates, but some of this stuff right here is killer. This is for LP fans only by Elvis. Now, typically when people show Elvis albums, like in their top list, they'll either show the debut, which is really good. That actually, if I did not keep to my one album per artist rule, it would have been in here. And from Elvis and Memphis, another great one. But I have to go with this one. This is kind of a little bit of a compilation of early RCA stuff and some Sun singles. This is technically the first mass release of stuff like That's Alright Mama, because that stuff was released on Sun Records, but it was only in the southern states. So this was kind of the first album where everybody across the country and across the world could really hear this stuff. So yeah, That's Alright, of course, is a classic. Lottie Miss Claudie, Mystery Train. I even like Poor Boy. Nobody talks about Poor Boy off of this, or really in the Elvis camp in general. It was in one of his movies, but I think it's a great track. Shake, Rattle, and Roll, and You're a Heartbreaker. When I went to Graceland, gosh, that was 3 years ago. When I went to Graceland 3 years ago, this was the album I played a lot in the CD player in the car. But yeah, great album. If you want to just have kind of a nice little early Elvis compilation, I'd get this. I actually found this in the bargain bin at a record store for $3, and it had been an album I had been on the lookout for, so it's nice to have a copy. Now, speaking of an album I'm on the lookout for, I have a repress because originals are just crazy money. It's the Chirping Crickets. Buddy Holly and the Chirping Crickets. If I didn't stick to my one album per artist rule, Buddy Holly's solo album from '58 also would have been on here. But the Chirping Crickets, very, very strong stuff on here. It starts out with Oh Boy, probably one of the greatest '50s rock tracks, I'd say, of all time. Get good stuff like Not Fade Away and Maybe Baby. And, of course, you also do have the more popular version of That'll Be the Day on here. A lot of great stuff. And some underrated stuff, too, like Rock Me Baby. This album just shows the full, it just kind of gets off the ground running, pretty much. It's kind of like Van Halen, but for '50s rock, in my opinion. Now, some people claim that there's filler on here, and maybe to some people it would be, but I love all the songs on here. Yeah, I love it all. This is credited to the Crickets because there was some weird record label dispute going back then. But yeah, just a lot of great stuff. I'm Looking for Someone to Love and Last Night. A lot of great stuff. Buddy Holly is just a talent that was taken away way too soon. And if you want to get kind of good picture of what he was working on, I'd get this. And I'd get a reissue of it. I would not fork out the money to buy an original pressing. I'll do that eventually because I'm nuts. But yeah, the Chirping Crickets. And then, this is going to be a head scratcher for some of y'all because this album is not like the others. This is a pop punk it kind of dips into metal a little bit. It's from 2002, from the Canadian band Sum 41. Does This Look Infected? This is a 2018 pressing of it, and vinyl pressings of this are really hard to come by. I paid $70 for this, because I missed out on the chance to buy it at retail. Actually, it was before the pandemic started. I missed out the chance to buy it, and then I ended up paying $70 for it. Now I think it's rising up. I think it's $200 or something now. But yeah, Does This Look Infected? Sum 41, before this album, they were doing mostly just pop punk stuff, like All Killer, the album All Killer No Filler, and the EP before that, Half Hour Power. This album kind of shows that they could be heavy. And now they had previous little flirtings with heavy metal. In fact, the last song off of All Killer No Filler is basically an Iron Maiden tribute act. And some of the songs off Half Hour Power. But this song, there's not a whole lot of just straightforward pop punk on this. The Hell song is the starter. A very, I don't know, it kind of gives you this feeling of dread, you know. And then my favorite song off of this is My Direction, which I can't really pinpoint anything else that sounds like it. But this is just an album that shines all the way through. It was actually, according to my Last FM, which I use to track what I listen to on my phone, because I'm weird like that, this was the most listened to album of 2020, which I guess with the coronavirus, it's pretty ironic. The album was called Does This Look Infected? But yeah, just a lot of great stuff off here. If you're kind of wanting to dip your toes into pop punk, or you've already have dipped your toes into some of the more popular pop punk stuff, and you want to hear something just a little heavier with a little bit of punk still there, I'd go with this one. Yeah, Sum 41, Does This Look Infected? And I think that is the youngest album on the list. So, yeah. And that was number 5. So number 4 is a indie rock classic. Well, maybe not indie rock. Alternative rock classic from 1986. It's prime mucore, prime rate your music core stuff. But this album is undeniable. And it took me a while to get a copy of this. And the copy I have of this is a bootleg. The Smiths, The Queen is Dead. Say what you want about Morrissey nowadays. This album, and just the Smiths' entire catalog, still holds up. Actually, you can barely see it. It's kind of blocked and it's not on camera, but I do have a poster of the Smiths up there. Whole album is just great. I mean, I love the Smiths. I love all their albums, really, but this one is where they just fully were at their peak. You get stuff like I Know It's Over, which is just a very heavy song, and I'm not talking about sound-wise, but just emotionally. They're a very heavy group. Man, like, just the atmosphere that song just kind of enraptures you with. And then you get stuff like Big Mouth Strikes Again, which every time I open Netflix, that's what I think. Frankly, Mr. Shankly's kind of a little goofy song. Some people like it, some people don't. I like it. There's a Light That Never Goes Out, which is the ultimate. It's like the most crass love song. Like, if a double-decker bus crashes into us, to die by your side is such a heavenly way to die. Like, it's that kind of, like, brooding kind of love song. And then Some Girls Are Bigger Than Others. They have a lot of, like, kind of just poetry. I think Morrissey is just a pure poet. He's kind of like, I'd say he's kind of like Jim Morrison of the Doors, where it's just pure poetry, a lot of his lyrics are. And I think his best lyrics are on this album. So I'd even say this is just a good starter to kind of dip your toes into more of the alternative stuff, really. Like, if you're wanting to get more into the 80s alt stuff, go with this. But yeah, The Cure, The Queen is Dead, is my number 4. Now we're going into the top 3. And these top 3 are very different from each other. They kind of do reflect the pattern of the list a little bit. But the 3 of them together are very different. And sometimes they interchange, but these top 3 have been my top 3 for a while. So yeah. Ritchie Valens, number 3. And this is not really an album I hear talked about, but I love it. I love every single song off of this. Ritchie Valens was just such a talent. He died way too young. You just hear, like, his ability to play and his ability to just arrange songs in the way he did. I mean, they're great. La Bamba is it's a traditional Mexican folk song, and he just turned it into his own. I don't know of many people who, when they hear La Bamba, they don't think of the Ritchie Valens version, or they don't think of the Los Lobos version that was based off the Ritchie Valens song. Either way, I think Ritchie Valens has kind of cemented the legacy of that Mexican folk song. And it's not just that either. Stuff like Donna, one of the best love songs of the 50s. Ooh My Head, just a great rocker. It was such a great rocker that Led Zeppelin stole it for Physical Graffiti. I love Led Zeppelin, though. But I'm just saying, like, Come On, Let's Go, just another fun little rocker. Doobie Doobie Wah, another fun little rocker. You want classic malt shop material, you get that Buddy Holly album I showed you, and you get this. Just classic stuff. Died way too young. Great album. Just great album in general. Oh, and before I put this back, We Belong Together, his version is the definitive version. The doo-wop version that came out before it was great, but it's the definitive version. All right, now we are in the top 2, and they kind of go back and forth. They go back and forth all the time, and they're both very different from each other, like I said. This album I'm going to show you is the definitive high school album for me, but I actually did not get into this album or this group until I was a senior in high school. And whenever I listen to this album, I just think about those times as a senior, all the craziness and trying to figure out life. Blink-182's Enema of the State. And this is the SRC blue vinyl pressing from 2015. This is just a classic of pop punk. It's got the opener Dumpweed, which is probably the greatest opener of any album. I know a lot of people are going to be fighting me in the comments with that. I think, at least in the realm of pop punk, Dumpweed is the greatest album opener of all time. There is not a bad song on here, in my opinion. What's My Age Again and All the Small Things, they're great, just pop songs in general. And then you get some of the deeper cuts, like Dysentery Gary, which is kind of like the angry simp song of the album, but it's great. It's great. And then the final track on this song, Anthem, oh my gosh. Talk about a great closer. Some of the other songs off this. Don't Leave Me, of course, is great. Going Away to College, for some people, is very relatable. Just a lot of greatness. Of course, Adam's song, very emotional. Yeah. Great album. My girlfriend and I, we both love this album. And there's just many great memories of us with this album. So, yeah. The Party song also, I gotta mention, that's just an awesome song. I have a funny memory of that with my girlfriend. I was actually trying to play that song, or we were trying to, like, learn stuff, and she pulled that up, and I was trying to learn it, and it was just way too fast, but I somehow finished it. I don't know. All right. Number one album of all time for me is an album that has stuck with me for many years. I've been loving this album, gosh, since I was maybe 13 or 14. And I never had an original pressing until maybe about a month ago. It's a soundtrack to an 80s movie, and it's produced by basically a very talented man with a very talented backing group with him. And I gotta show it. Number one album of all time for me is Purple Rain by Prince and the Revolution. There is nothing I would change about this album. Every note is perfect. There is not a single note on here that is wasted. Even the opening track, Let's Go Crazy. Everything about that is just great. Like, it showcases Prince as a songwriter, and Prince is just a player. And when I mean player, I mean guitar player and just arranger and everything. And then, of course, Take Me With You is just a fun, little, sweet, serene little song. And then you get into the emotionally heavy songs, like the beautiful ones. The atmospheric, it's kind of like The Queen Is Dead, but like the atmosphere of it is just amazing. And then Computer Blue, of course, is great. Darling Nikki, very notorious. We can thank that song for the parental advisory sticker we have, which I think is ironic because they never gave that sticker to this album, even though it was the one that started it all. And then you get When Doves Cry, a very bassless song. Literally, there is no bass in it. And it somehow is one of the greatest pop songs of all time. And then I Would Die For You, he kind of just, oh man, greatness. And then Baby I'm a Star, it's just great. And then this album's beyond description for me. But the last track, Purple Rain, talk about a closing track. And I said that for Enema of the State, I know, but just talk about, oh man, it's like, there's no way to describe it for me. It's just a certain feeling that you feel with this album. And if that's not good enough to explain, you gotta listen to it yourself. I mean, it's just an amazing song. The whole album is amazing. The movie with it is alright, but man, talk about an amazing album. Yeah. So that is my top 10 albums of all time. Yeah. Catch you on the flip side. I am out of here.